Before talking about NoSQL offerings in Azure, let's take a close look into NoSQL itself. A NoSQL database provides a mechanism for storage and retrieval of data that is modeled in means other than the tabular relations. I am sure all of you have worked with relational databases. A few examples are SQL Server, Azure SQL Database, and MySQL. And all these databases have something in common. They keep the data in tables, and you can define relations between these tables. This is not the case for NoSQL databases. In a NoSQL database, the data is not saved in tables. For example, instead of creating a table named person and adding 2 columns for name and address, you create a JSON structure for the person object. This document in turn will be saved into a NoSQL database. So as you can see, we didn't use any tables to store the person object. And this is the main idea around NoSQL databases. So any database that stores data by means other than tabular relations can be a NoSQL database. Such databases have existed since the late 1960s, but didn't have the name NoSQL. NoSQL databases are increasingly used in big data and real-time web applications. So the data structures used by NoSQL databases to store data include key values, wide columns, graphs, or documents such as JSON documents. So NoSQL database architecture allows simplicity of design, easy horizontal scaling, and finer control over availability. Horizontal scaling was very difficult for relational databases, and most relational databases used vertical scaling, meaning getting a better and bigger machine for their database engine. However, for NoSQL databases, you can have many cheap machines and scale your database horizontally. So you are creating a new application and you need to store information about a person. Using a relational database, you needed to first create a table with the fixed schema and predict all the columns you want to have for the person object. For example, first name, last name, email. This is not the case for a NoSQL database. You don't need to define the schema first. It makes it easier to update the application and data based on the requirement changes. Back in the days, we had a good understanding of the data structure when starting the project. In many today's projects, you don't have a clear understanding of the data structure. So NoSQL databases are a good choice for these projects. These databases are designed to handle unstructured data. And finally, as mentioned, scaling is much cheaper for NoSQL databases because you don't need to scale up, meaning buying a better machine to host your NoSQL database. You can scale out over cheap commodity servers. It is important to note that NoSQL and non-relational data are not the same thing. So NoSQL databases shouldn't be only recommended to store non-relational data. These databases can be used to store relational data as well. Many of the customers of Azure Cosmos DB are using this database to store relational data. So NoSQL databases are mainly about horizontal scalability, availability, and price. Use these databases when the workload calls for cheaper storage, massive scale, low latency, and global distribution. Also, let's clarify the term NoSQL. Some NoSQL databases, such as Cosmos DB, support SQL-like queries. Also, for other NoSQL databases, such as MongoDB, you can use SQL queries to select data.